The organ music swelled through St. Crispin's Cathedral as Elowyn Mercer stood at the altar, watching her future unravel in front of 300 guests. She wore ivory silk that had taken 6 seamstresses 4 months to complete. Orange blossoms crowned her dark hair. Her hands clutched a bouquet of white roses so tightly the thorns pierced through her gloves, but she couldn't feel the pain. She couldn't feel anything except the cold spreading through her chest as her younger sister Lisette walked up the aisle toward her. Lisette wasn't supposed to be walking anywhere. She was supposed to be seated in the front pew with their mother, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief and pretending to be happy for her older sister's advantageous match. Instead, Lisette was wearing pale blue silk, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls, her smile sweet and triumphant as she approached the altar where Elowyn stood beside Aldrich Vane, the man she was supposed to marry in approximately 3 minutes. "Aldrich," Lisette said softly, extending her hand. "I'm ready now." Elowyn turned to her betrothed, waiting for him to look confused, to ask what was happening, to defend her. Aldrich took Lisette's hand. "Finally," he said, and the word was a blade that cut Elowyn's world in half. The whispers started immediately, 300 voices rising like wasps disturbed from a nest. Elowyn heard fragments. "What's happening? Is that the younger sister? Good heavens, did you know?" "I don't understand," Elowyn heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Aldrich, what is this?" He finally looked at her, and there was nothing in his eyes. No guilt, no regret, no acknowledgement that they'd spent 8 months planning this wedding, that he'd held her hand in the garden last week and told her he couldn't wait to make her his wife. "Come now, Elowyn, you must have known." His voice was patient, almost kind, like he was explaining something obvious to a slow child. "Lisette and I have had an understanding for months. We simply needed to wait until your father had signed the contracts." "The contracts," Elowyn repeated numbly. "The merger between our family's shipping companies. Your father needed the Vane fleet. I needed Mercer Capital." Aldrich straightened his cravat with his free hand, the one not holding Lisette. The marriage was always just a formality. It didn't particularly matter which daughter stood at this altar, and Lisette is so much more suited to the role of my wife. Lisette leaned into Aldrich's shoulder, her blue eyes finding Elowyn's. "Don't be dramatic, sister. You were always too serious for him, too plain, too concerned with books and charity work instead of society." She smiled. "I'm doing you a favor, really. Now you're free." "Free." Elowyn looked out at the congregation. 300 faces stared back at her, some shocked, some amused, some already composing the gossip they'd spread at dinner parties for months to come. In the front pew, her mother sat frozen, her face pale. Beside her, Lord Mercer, Elowyn's father, was studying his pocket watch, as if the timing of this humiliation was his primary concern. He'd known. They'd all known. The realization crashed through her like ice water. The hushed conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Lisette's new gowns, finer than anything Elowyn owned. Her mother's nervous glances. Her father's sudden insistence that Elowyn memorize every clause of the marriage contracts, as if he wanted to ensure the business arrangement was secure before the personal betrayal was revealed. She'd been a placeholder, a name on a document, a convenient eldest daughter to secure the deal until the prettier, more charming younger sister was ready to take her place. "Elowyn," the priest said uncertainly, "perhaps you should sit down?" "Sit down. Take a seat in the congregation and watch her sister marry the man she'd been promised to. Smile politely while her entire future evaporated. Go home afterward to the family that had orchestrated this humiliation and pretend everything was fine." She couldn't breathe. The cathedral walls were closing in, the stained glass saints staring down at her with painted pity. She needed air. She needed to run. She needed... "I'll take her." A voice cut through the whispers, deep and cold as a winter river. The congregation fell silent. Elowin turned toward the sound. A man was standing in the aisle, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in black from his polished boots to his perfectly tailored coat. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples despite a face that couldn't have seen more than 35 years. His features were sharp, almost severe. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes the color of storm clouds that swept over the scene with absolute authority. Elowin didn't recognize him, but from the gasps rippling through the congregation, everyone else did. "Your Grace," Lord Mercer stammered, rising from his pew. "We weren't expecting you to attend." Clearly. The stranger walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He stopped beside Elowin, close enough that she could smell leather and sandalwood, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Miss Mercer, I believe? The eldest daughter?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then I have a proposition for you." His voice carried to every corner of the cathedral. "Marry me instead." The words hung in the sacred air like a thunderclap that refused to fade. "Marry me instead." Elowin stared at the stranger, certain she'd misheard. Behind her, Lisette made a sound of outrage. Aldrich sputtered something incoherent. The congregation erupted into chaos. "This is absurd!" Lord Mercer pushed his way toward the altar. "Your Grace, you cannot simply—" "I can do whatever I wish, Lord Mercer. I'm the Duke of Ashworth." The stranger's eyes never left Elowin's face. "The question is whether your daughter wishes to accept." The Duke of Ashworth. Theron Blackwood. Even in her shocked state, Elowin recognized the name. Every person in society recognized it. He was one of the wealthiest men in England, owner of half the coal mines in the north, rumored to have the ear of the king himself. He was also known as the Cold Duke, a man who never attended social functions, never courted anyone, and never, by any account, did anything without calculated purpose. And he was proposing to her, in front of everyone, in the middle of her own humiliation. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Something passed behind his gray eyes. Approval, perhaps, or surprise that she'd asked. "Because I need a wife," he said simply, "and you need an escape. I'd say that makes us well matched. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you've just been publicly discarded by a family that sees you as nothing more than a signature on a contract. I know that if you walk out of this cathedral alone, your reputation will be destroyed by nightfall and your prospects reduced to spinsterhood or worse." He tilted his head slightly. "I know that your sister is wearing a smug expression that suggests she's never faced a consequence in her life. I'd very much like to change that." Behind Elowin, Lisette's voice rose sharply. "This is ridiculous. Aldrich, tell him he can't do this." "On what grounds?" The Duke's tone was ice. "The lady isn't married yet. She's free to accept any proposal she chooses." He extended his hand toward Elowin, palm up, waiting. "What do you say, Miss Mercer? Would you rather stay here and be pitied? Or would you like to walk out of this cathedral as a duchess?" Elowin looked at his hand. Strong fingers, a signet ring glinting gold, steady as stone. She looked back at the altar where Lisette clung to Aldrich's arm, where the priest stood frozen with his Bible, where 300 guests watched her like she was a play, staged for their entertainment. She looked at her father, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She thought about what waited for her if she refused. The carriage ride home in silence, the pitying looks from servants, the years of whispered scandal. Poor Elowin Mercer, abandoned at the altar for her own sister. Couldn't even keep a man who'd been contracted to marry her. Then she thought about what it would mean to take this stranger's hand. To walk out of here not as a discarded bride, but as a duchess. To see her sister's smug expression crumble. To have, for once in her life, the upper hand. It was mad. It was reckless. It was probably the worst decision she'd ever make. Elowyn placed her hand in his. "Yes," she said. The Duke's fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like satisfaction. Wise choice. He turned to the congregation, his voice ringing through the cathedral. "You're all witnesses. Miss Elowyn Mercer has accepted my proposal. I trust you'll spread the word appropriately." He glanced at the priest. "Father, I'll require your services at Thornhaven within the week. I'll send word with the details." Then, without another glance at Lisette or Aldrich or Lord Mercer, the Duke of Ashworth tucked Elowyn's hand into the crook of his arm and walked her down the aisle. The congregation parted like water before them. Elowyn kept her shoulders squared, her head held level, her expression as calm as she could make it while her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt every stare, heard every whisper, saw every dropped jaw and scandalized fan. But she didn't look back. Not once. Outside, the autumn sun was bright and sharp after the cathedral's dim interior. A black carriage waited at the curb, sleek and expensive, emblazoned with a crest she assumed belonged to the Blackwood family. A footman opened the door. The Duke handed her in, then followed, settling onto the seat across from her as the door closed and the carriage lurched into motion. Only then, in the sudden quiet, did Elowyn allow herself to breathe. The carriage rolled through the cobblestone streets, carrying Elowyn away from everything she'd known. Through the window she watched St. Crispin's Cathedral shrink into the distance, its spire stabbing the autumn sky like an accusation. "You have questions," the Duke said. It wasn't a question. Elowyn turned to face him. In the enclosed space of the carriage he seemed even larger, more imposing. His gray eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel like a document being reviewed for flaws. "I have many questions," she said carefully. "Starting with the obvious one. Why? I told you, I need a wife. There are hundreds of women in London who would marry you willingly, women with better connections, larger dowries, and fewer scandals attached to their names." Elowyn folded her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. "You could have anyone. Why choose a woman you've never met, in the middle of her own ruined wedding? Because those other women want something from me. They want my title, my wealth, my influence. They would come with expectations, demands, and family entanglements." He crossed one long leg over the other. "You want nothing from me except escape. That makes you useful." "Useful," Elowyn repeated. The word stung more than she expected. "Don't look so offended. Being useful is far better than being decorative, which is clearly what your family intended for your sister." A ghost of something, not quite humor, crossed his face. "I watched you in there, you know. When your sister walked up that aisle, when your betrothed dismissed you like a servant who'd outlived her purpose. Any other woman would have collapsed, wept, made a scene. You stood there and asked questions. I was in shock. You were thinking, processing, looking for a way out." He leaned forward slightly. "That's the kind of woman I need. Someone who can think clearly when everything is falling apart." "And what exactly do you need me for? What is this arrangement?" The Duke was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window before returning to her face. "Are you familiar with the Vane family's business dealings?" "Aldrich's family? They own a shipping fleet. That's why my father wanted the marriage. He needed their ships for his trade routes. What your father doesn't know, what almost no one knows, is that the Vane fleet has been running more than legitimate cargo." The Duke's voice dropped, hardened. "Smuggling, weapons, stolen goods, and worse." Elowyn's breath caught. "Worse?" "People, Miss Mercer. The Vanes have been transporting people, selling them to the highest bidder overseas." His jaw tightened. "I've been trying to expose them for 3 years. Every time I get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses vanish. The Vanes have powerful friends who protect them. What does this have to do with me? Your father just signed contracts binding the Mercer Shipping Company to the Vanes. Your sister is about to marry into that family. You spent 8 months engaged to Aldrich Vane, 8 months with access to their homes, their conversations, their secrets. He met her eyes. You know things, Miss Mercer. Things you may not even realize you know. Elowin thought back to the months of dinners at the Vane estate, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered, Aldrich's occasional meetings that ran late into the night, the locked rooms she was never allowed to enter. I never saw anything definitive, she said slowly. But there were moments, conversations that didn't make sense. Visitors who came and went without introduction. That's a start. The Duke nodded. Here's what I'm proposing. You marry me. You become the Duchess of Ashworth. You'll have protection, status, resources your family never gave you. In return, you help me build a case against the Vanes. Everything you remember, everything you observed, we piece it together until we have enough to destroy them. And my sister? My father? If they're complicit in the Vanes' crimes, they'll face consequences. If not, they'll simply lose their precious business alliance. His expression was implacable. Does that trouble you? Elowin thought about Lisette's smile as she took Aldrich's hand. Her father studying his pocket watch while her world collapsed. Her mother's silence. No, she said quietly. It doesn't. Then we have an agreement? Not yet. Elowin lifted her chin. If I'm going to help you, I want to know the full truth. Why do you care so much about destroying the Vanes? This isn't just politics. It's personal. A crack appeared in the Duke's composure. You're perceptive. You said that's why you chose me. So tell me, what did they do to you? A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the clatter of hooves on cobblestone. They killed my brother, Theron finally said. 5 years ago. He discovered what they were doing and threatened to expose them. They made it look like a riding accident. His voice remained level, but his eyes burned cold. So yes, Miss Mercer, this is personal. I intend to dismantle everything the Vanes have built. I intend to see them ruined, imprisoned, and forgotten. And I will use every tool at my disposal to do it. Including me? Including you. But I won't lie to you or manipulate you or discard you when you become inconvenient. You'll know exactly where you stand with me. Always. That's more than your family ever offered. Elowin considered his words, the hard truth of them. A marriage of strategy. A partnership of revenge. Nothing romantic. Nothing tender. Just two people with aligned interests and shared enemies. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first honest offer she'd ever received. One condition, she said. If I help you destroy them, I want the families they've hurt to be helped. Not just revenge, justice, compensation for victims, real change. The Duke's mask slipped, revealing surprise beneath. Or perhaps respect. Agreed. And if this arrangement ever puts me in danger you can't protect me from, you let me go. No arguments. That won't happen. Promise me anyway. Theron extended his hand. I promise. Do we have an agreement, Miss Mercer? She looked at his hand, then at his face, searching for deception and finding none. He was cold, calculating, driven by vengeance, but he was also honest about it. After a lifetime of pretty lies, his brutal truth felt almost refreshing. Elowin took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was firm, warm, despite his icy reputation. Then welcome to Thornhaven, future Duchess. We have a great deal of work to do. Thornhaven emerged from the mist like something from a Gothic novel. The estate sat atop a hill overlooking the moors, its dark stone walls rising against a gray sky. Unlike the elegant townhouses of London, this was a structure built for survival. Thick walls, narrow windows, towers at each corner that spoke of centuries when such defenses were necessary. "It's not welcoming," Theron said, watching her reaction. "But it's safe. No one enters Thornhaven without my knowledge." The carriage passed through iron gates guarded by men who nodded to the Duke with military precision. As they approached the main entrance, Eowyn counted at least a dozen staff assembled on the steps, standing in neat rows despite the cold wind. "They're here to meet you," Theron said. "Word travels fast. By tomorrow, every household in England will know I've claimed a bride." Claimed. The word sent an odd shiver through her. The carriage stopped. Theron descended first, then offered his hand to help her down. Eowyn stepped onto the gravel drive, acutely aware of her wedding dress, now wrinkled from the journey and the orange blossoms wilting in her hair. She must look absurd, a bride without a wedding, a duchess without a marriage. "Your Grace?" A tall woman with silver hair and sharp cheekbones stepped forward. Her posture was impeccable, her expression revealing nothing. "Welcome home. The household is prepared." "Mrs. Fairfax, this is Miss Eowyn Mercer. She'll be the Duchess of Ashworth by week's end." Theron's voice carried no emotion. "See that she has everything she requires. The blue suite in the East Wing." "Of course, Your Grace." Theron turned to Eowyn. "Mrs. Fairfax manages the household. Any needs? Any questions? She'll address them. I have business to attend to. We'll dine together at 8 to discuss arrangements." Then he was gone, striding into the manor without a backward glance, leaving Eowyn surrounded by strangers. Mrs. Fairfax's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "This way, Miss Mercer. You must be exhausted." The interior of Thornhaven was warmer than its exterior suggested. Tapestries lined the stone walls, fires crackled in massive hearths, and the furniture, while dark, was well maintained. Mrs. Fairfax led her through corridors that twisted and turned until Eowyn was thoroughly lost. "The East Wing is the most comfortable," Mrs. Fairfax explained. "His Grace occupies the West Wing. You'll have complete privacy." Complete privacy, separate wings. This truly was a business arrangement. Her suite was larger than her entire bedroom at home. A sitting room with velvet chairs, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in blue silk, a dressing room with empty wardrobes, and a private bathing chamber. "The seamstress arrives tomorrow," Mrs. Fairfax said. "You'll need a proper wardrobe. His Grace has authorized unlimited expenditure." Eowyn touched the edge of a silk curtain, still processing. This morning she'd been Eowyn Mercer, overlooked eldest daughter. Tonight she stood in a duke's fortress, preparing to become someone entirely new. "Mrs. Fairfax," she asked quietly, "what kind of man is he? Truly?" The housekeeper paused at the door. "He's fair, miss. Cold, but fair. And he keeps his promises." She met Eowyn's eyes. "Don't give him reason to regret choosing you, and he won't give you reason to regret accepting." The wedding took place 4 days later in Thornhaven's private chapel. No guests, no celebration, just Eowyn, Theron, the priest, and 2 servants as witnesses. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Afterward, Theron handed her a ring, a simple gold band set with a single sapphire, and nodded once. "It's done," he said. "You're safe now." Safe. Not loved, not cherished. Safe. Eowyn supposed that was enough. The weeks that followed blurred into a relentless education. Every morning, tutors arrived to drill her on etiquette, history, and the complex social hierarchies she'd need to navigate as a duchess. She learned which families were allies and which were enemies. She memorized titles, grudges, scandals that stretched back generations. She practiced curtsying until her knees ached, and conversation until her throat was raw. "The Countess of Pemberton despises anyone who mentions her first husband," her etiquette tutor warned. Lord Ashby cheats at cards but must never be accused. Lady Whitmore's son died in a duel. Never discuss honor in her presence. Society, Allewen discovered, was a minefield. One wrong step could destroy everything. She also learned about her husband. Theron woke before dawn and worked until midnight. He took his meals in his study more often than not, surrounded by papers and correspondence. He rode out to inspect his estates twice weekly and received visitors only when absolutely necessary. He wasn't always like this, Mrs. Fairfax confided one evening. Before his brother died, he laughed, attended parties, had friends. She shook her head. Now he has only purpose. Purpose. Revenge. The destruction of the Vanes. Each evening at 8, Allewen dined with Theron in the formal dining room. He questioned her methodically about her time with Aldrich's family. What had she seen? What had she heard? Who visited? What rooms were off limits? She answered as thoroughly as she could, dredging up memories she'd dismissed as unimportant. The shipping manifests Aldrich reviewed late at night, the visitors who arrived without names, the servants who disappeared without explanation. There was a cellar, she remembered one evening, at the Vane country estate. Aldrich told me it was storage for wine, but I saw men carrying crates down there once. Heavy crates, and I heard sounds. Theron leaned forward. What kind of sounds? Allewen's stomach turned. I thought it was animals at the time, but now I think... She couldn't finish. People, Theron said flatly. They were holding people there. I should have investigated. You would have disappeared like my brother. His voice held no accusation. You survived. That's what matters. Now we use what you know. By the end of the 4th week, Allewen barely recognized herself in the mirror. The seamstress had transformed her wardrobe. Rich silks and fine wool in deep jewel tones that made her look older, more commanding. Her hair was styled differently, more elaborate. Even her posture had changed. Shoulders back, presence commanding. She looked like a duchess. She was beginning to feel like one. The invitation arrived on a silver tray during breakfast. Lord and Lady Hartwell cordially invite the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth to the Hartwell Autumn Ball. Allewen read aloud. This Saturday evening. Across the table, Theron set down his coffee. The Hartwells are influential. Refusing would raise questions. Will the Vanes be there? Almost certainly not. The Hartwells and Vanes have feuded for years over a land dispute. But their guests will include people who know the Vanes, who invest with them, who could be turned against them. He studied her. Are you ready? Allewen thought about 5 weeks of lessons, of practice, of preparing for exactly this moment. I'm ready. The Hartwell estate blazed with candlelight as their carriage approached. Hundreds of guests milled about the entrance, all glittering gowns and polished boots. Allewen's heart hammered beneath her emerald silk dress, but she kept her breathing steady. Remember, Theron murmured as they approached the doors. You're not performing. You're commanding. They should want your approval, not the reverse. The butler announced them. The Duke and Duchess of Ashworth. Every head turned. The whispers started immediately, a wave of sound that followed them into the ballroom. Allewen felt the weight of scrutiny, hundreds of eyes measuring, judging, and searching for weakness. She squared her shoulders and let Theron guide her into the crowd. Lady Hartwell descended upon them first, a plump woman with kind eyes and a reputation for collecting gossip like precious gems. Your Grace, how wonderful that you finally emerged from your hermitage, and this must be your mysterious bride. She clasped Allewen's hands. My dear, you've set every tongue in London wagging. How deliciously scandalous. I prefer unexpected, Allewen replied with a slight smile. Scandal implies wrongdoing. I simply accepted a better offer. Lady Hartwell laughed with genuine delight. Oh, like her, Ashworth. Wherever did you find her? Standing exactly where where she deserved to be, Theron said smoothly, above those who underestimated her. As the evening progressed, Elowen found her rhythm. She complimented gowns, discussed charitable work, and listened attentively while revealing nothing of importance. Lady Grantham, a sharp-eyed widow with a reputation for shrewd investments, proved particularly interested in conversation. Elowen steered toward her deliberately. "I've heard such troubling rumors about shipping ventures lately," Elowen said lightly. "One hardly knows whom to trust with one's money anymore." Lady Grantham's eyes narrowed with interest. "Rumors? What sort of rumors?" "Oh, nothing specific. Just whispers about irregularities, manifests that don't match cargo, returns that seem too generous." Elowen sipped her champagne. "My father always said, if it seems too good to be true, it usually is." "Interesting," Lady Grantham murmured. "I've had some concerns about my own investments recently, with Vane and Associates, as it happens." "Have you? How troubling. Perhaps an audit might set your mind at ease." Lady Grantham studied Elowen for a long moment. "Perhaps it might. Thank you, Your Grace. This has been an illuminating conversation." Later, Elowen spoke with Sir Edmund Price, a barrister with connections to Parliament whom Theron had pointed out earlier. "Sir Edmund," she said pleasantly, "my husband speaks highly of your work on trade reform." "Does he?" Sir Edmund looked pleased. "The Duke and I share concerns about certain shipping practices." "As do I. Should evidence of wrongdoing ever surface, it's reassuring to know principled men like yourself exist to pursue justice." Sir Edmund's expression sharpened with understanding. "Should such evidence arise, Your Grace, I would be honored to review it." Seeds planted, allies identified. She felt Theron's gaze on her from across the room, approving. By evening's end, she'd laid groundwork with 6 different families, all of whom had connections to the Vane's investment schemes. Nothing accusatory, nothing traceable, just enough doubt to make them look closer. In the carriage home, Theron was quiet for a long moment. "You exceeded expectations," he finally said. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an assessment." But something almost warm entered his gray eyes. "Lady Grantham will audit her accounts within the month. Sir Edmund will be watching for evidence. You've begun to crack their foundation." Elowen looked out the window at the passing darkness. She'd entered that ballroom as a woman still learning her role. She'd left as something more. The Vanes didn't know it yet, but the war against them had officially begun. 3 nights after the Hartwell ball, Elowen couldn't sleep. She wandered Thornhaven's corridors, a candle in hand, trying to quiet her restless thoughts. The manor was different at night, shadows pooling in corners, portraits watching with painted eyes. She found herself drawn to the library, a vast room she discovered during her first week, but rarely entered. The door was ajar. Firelight glowed within. She pushed it open and found Theron standing at the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring at the darkness beyond. He didn't turn at her entrance. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No. You?" "I don't sleep much." He gestured to a chair by the fire. "Sit, if you'd like." Elowen settled into the leather chair, tucking her dressing gown around her. The embers shifted in the grate, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with thousands of books. "Tell me about him," she said quietly. "Your brother." Theron was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved from the window, settling into the chair across from her. "His name was Marcus. He was 3 years younger than me. Brighter, kinder, better with people." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "He was supposed to be the charming one while I handled the business. That was our arrangement." "What happened?" "He fell in love with a woman named Clara Whitfield. Her family had invested heavily with the Vanes. When their return seemed impossibly high, Marcus investigated. He discovered the truth, not just the fraud, but the trafficking. He gathered evidence. He was going to present it to Parliament." Theron's grip tightened on his glass. 3 days before his testimony, his horse threw him during a morning ride, broke his neck. But it wasn't an accident. The horse had been drugged. I found the proof later, too late for it to matter. The veins had a groom in their pocket. By the time I connected the pieces, the groom had vanished, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. His voice was flat, controlled. Marcus died trying to do the right thing, and I couldn't save him. Elowen leaned forward. So you've spent 5 years trying to finish what he started. Every day, every decision, every alliance I've built, every enemy I've made, it all leads back to them. He met her eyes. I told you this was personal. Now you understand how personal. I understand wanting revenge. Aldrich and Lisette took everything from me in a single moment. My future, my dignity, my family. She paused. But what happens after? When the veins are destroyed, what then? Theron looked at her strangely. No one's ever asked me that. Maybe they should have. Maybe. He set down his glass. Honestly, I don't know. I've spent so long focused on destruction that I haven't considered what comes after. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps I'll simply be empty. Or perhaps, Elowen said softly, you'll finally be free to build something instead of tearing it down. The fire popped between them. Something unguarded appeared in Theron's expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone grateful and compliant, someone who'd follow orders without questions. His mouth curved slightly. Instead, I got a woman who negotiates from a position of weakness and asks dukes about their feelings. Is that a complaint? No. He held her gaze. It's an observation. You make me think about things I've avoided for years. I'm not certain whether to thank you or resent you for it. Elowen smiled. You could try thanking me. See how it feels. Thank you, Elowen. Her name and his voice sounded different than before. Warmer. For not being what I expected. That night, walking back to her chambers, Elowen realized something had changed between them. The arrangement remained, the strategy unchanged. But underneath the contracts and calculations, something human was beginning to grow. The invitation to Lord Ashford's winter gala arrived 2 weeks later. Unlike the Hartwell Ball, this event would include the Vanes. Aldrich and Lisette will be there, Theron confirmed, scanning the guest list. Along with his parents, the entire family, presenting a united front. Elowen's stomach tightened. They know we've been asking questions. They suspect. The audits Lady Grantham and others initiated have made them nervous. They'll attend this gala to demonstrate confidence, to remind society of their power and connections. He looked at her. They'll also want to see you. To intimidate me. To assess you. To determine how much of a threat you actually pose. Theron set down the guest list. This is the confrontation we've been building toward. Are you prepared? Elowen thought about the months of training, the careful seeds she'd planted, the woman she'd become since that humiliating day at the altar. Yes. The Ashford estate glittered like a jewel box when they arrived. Hundreds of candles reflected off crystal chandeliers, casting rainbows across silk gowns and polished floors. The cream of society had gathered, lords and ladies who controlled fortunes and fates with casual words over champagne. Elowen wore midnight blue velvet, sapphires at her throat that matched her wedding ring. Theron stood beside her in severe black, a matched set of ice and elegance. The Duke and Duchess of Ashworth, the butler announced. She felt the ripple of attention, but this time it didn't frighten her. She'd earned her place here. They moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, accepting congratulations on their marriage. Elowen smiled and deflected and watched, always watching, for the faces she dreaded. She saw Lisette first. Her sister stood near the refreshment table, radiant in rose pink, laughing at something Aldrich whispered in her ear. They looked perfect together, golden and beautiful, the image of young love. Elowin felt Theron's hand cover hers. "Steady," he murmured. "I'm steady. Your pulse says otherwise." She forced her breathing to slow. "I'm fine. I just need a moment." "Take all the time you need. I'll be right here." As if sensing her gaze, Lisette turned. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Lisette's smile faltered, then hardened into something sharp. She said something to Aldrich. Together, they began moving through the crowd toward Elowin and Theron. "They're coming," Elowin said quietly. "Let them come. Remember who you are now." Lisette reached them first, her expression arranged into poisonous sweetness. "Sister! What a surprise! I didn't expect to see you in society again after your situation." "Situation?" Elowin kept her voice pleasant. "You mean my marriage to a duke?" "Yes, it was rather sudden." "Marriage." Lisette's laugh was brittle. "Is that what we're calling it? Everyone knows he only claimed you out of pity, the poor abandoned bride, rescued like a stray dog." "Careful," Theron said softly. "You're speaking about my wife." Aldrich stepped forward, his handsome face arranged in false concern. "Your Grace, surely you understand our surprise. Elowin was always so unremarkable. We assumed she'd simply fade into obscurity after our arrangement ended." "Your arrangement ended when you discarded her at the altar for her own sister." Theron's voice could have frozen wine. "Forgive me if I don't value your assessment of her worth." "There's no need for hostility." Lady Vane appeared, elegant and controlled. "We're all civilized people here. What's done is done. Surely we can move forward pleasantly." "Pleasant?" Elowin met her former, almost mother-in-law's eyes. "You orchestrated my humiliation, Lady Vane. You knew exactly what would happen at that altar. Pleasant isn't what I'd call our relationship." "Such accusations." Lady Vane's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Be careful, dear. Making enemies of the wrong people can be dangerous." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice, from someone who understands how society really works." Lady Vane glanced at Theron. "Your husband may have titles, but the Vanes have reach. Old connections. Deep roots. I'd hate to see his young bride destroyed by her own recklessness." Theron stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding every inch of space. "And I'd hate to see the Vane family exposed for what they truly are. Frauds. Criminals. Murderers." His voice was quiet, deadly. "Walk away, Lady Vane, while you still can." For a moment something crossed Lady Vane's face. Fear. Then it vanished behind her polished mask. "Enjoy the party," she said smoothly, "while it lasts." The Vanes retreated into the crowd. Elowin realized her hands were shaking. "That wasn't a social warning," she whispered. "That was a threat." "Yes." Theron's jaw was tight. "Which means we're running out of time. They're planning something." 2 days after the Ashford Gala, Theron received word that made the blood drain from his face. "Your cousin," he said carefully, entering Elowin's sitting room. "Marjorie, the one who lives in Somerset." Elowin looked up from her correspondence. "What about her?" "She's been taken." The words didn't make sense at first. "Taken? What do you mean, taken?" Theron handed her a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message brief. "Tell your Duchess to reconsider her accusations. Marjorie Holt will be returned unharmed when we receive assurances of silence. You have 1 week." Elowin's hands trembled. "Marjorie is 17. She has nothing to do with any of this." "That's precisely why they chose her. Someone close enough to hurt you, distant enough that I wouldn't have thought to protect her." Theron's expression was granite. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated. This is the Vanes' fault." Elowin stood, her fear crystallizing into fury. "They took an innocent girl to silence us. They're monsters. Monsters with your cousin. Theron took her hands. Elowyn, we need to consider— No. She pulled away. If you're about to suggest we back down, don't. That's exactly what they want. They'll hold Marjorie over us forever, demand more silence, more compliance, until we're as trapped as their other victims. Then what do you propose? Elowyn paced the room, her mind racing. Lady Vane said they have old connections, deep roots. That means they have enemies too, people they've wronged over the years, people who might help us if given the chance. I've cultivated some of those connections already. Then we use them. All of them. We force a confrontation so public, so undeniable, that the Vanes can't bury it. She turned to face him. Lord Pemberton is hosting a charity auction next week. Half of Parliament will attend. If we expose them there, in front of everyone who matters, they'll have no choice but to release Marjorie to avoid worse scrutiny. Theron's eyes sharpened. It's risky. If we don't have enough evidence, we'll look like fools and your cousin pays the price. Then we make sure we have enough evidence. They worked through the night, compiling everything they'd gathered. Financial records showing fraudulent investments, testimony from servants who'd witnessed suspicious activities, shipping manifests that didn't match cargo, and most damning of all, a letter Marcus had written before his death, documenting what he'd discovered. I never showed this to anyone, Theron admitted, holding the aged paper. It felt too personal, too painful. It's also proof. Elowyn touched his arm. Marcus died trying to expose them. Let his words finally be heard. Theron looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. The night before the auction, they sat together in the library, the fire burning low. Everything was prepared. Tomorrow would determine everything. Whatever happens, Theron said quietly, I want you to know that choosing you wasn't strategy. Elowyn looked at him. What? In the cathedral. When I claimed you? He stared at the flames. I told you I needed a wife, that you were useful. That was true. But it wasn't why I did it. Then why? Because I saw someone being destroyed by people who should have loved her. Because I recognized that expression. The moment when you realize everyone you trusted has betrayed you. Because I couldn't stand there and watch it happen again, when I had the power to stop it. He finally met her eyes. I didn't save you for strategy, Elowyn. I saved you because I couldn't bear not to. Her breath caught. Theron. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite their strength. Tomorrow we fight. But tonight, I need you to know that whatever this started as, it's become something else. Something I never expected. He paused. Something I don't want to lose. Elowyn leaned into his touch. You won't lose me. Promise? Promise. He kissed her then, soft and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. Not a kiss of arrangement or strategy, but something real and raw and terrifying in its honesty. When they finally separated, Elowyn was breathless. Tomorrow, she whispered. Tomorrow, he agreed, together. The Pemberton charity auction drew 300 of England's most powerful figures, lords, ladies, members of Parliament, wealthy merchants. Everyone who mattered gathered beneath crystal chandeliers to bid on art and demonstrate their generosity. Elowyn and Theron arrived early, positioned near the stage where the auction would take place. Their allies were scattered throughout the crowd. Lady Grantham near the refreshment table, Lord Ashford by the entrance, Sir Edmund Price standing ready near the stage. The Vanes arrived at 8, a united front of false confidence. Aldrich escorted Lisette, whose rose gown seemed deliberately chosen to echo the dress she'd worn when she'd stolen Elowyn's groom. Lord and Lady Vane followed, nodding to acquaintances, performing respectability. They don't know, Theron murmured. They think tonight is just another social engagement. Good. Let them be surprised. The auction proceeded normally through its first hour. Paintings sold for hundreds of pounds. A rare manuscript fetched a small fortune. Lord Pemberton, playing host, kept the crowd entertained between lots. Then Theron stepped forward. "My lords and ladies," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter, "I beg your indulgence for a brief interruption." The room quieted. Lord Pemberton looked surprised but gestured for him to continue. "Many of you have invested your fortunes with Vane and Associates. You trust them with your family's security, your children's futures." Theron's gaze swept the crowd. "That trust has been betrayed." Whispers erupted. The Vanes went rigid. "That's quite an accusation, Your Grace," Lord Vane said loudly. "I hope you have evidence to support such slander." "I have extensive evidence." Theron gestured to Sir Edmund, who stepped forward carrying a leather case. "Financial records showing systematic fraud, investment returns manufactured from nothing. Dozens of families robbed of their savings through elaborate deception." "Lies!" Aldrich pushed forward. "This is revenge, nothing more. Everyone knows the Duke of Ashworth has a vendetta against our family." "I do," Theron agreed calmly, "because 5 years ago, your family murdered my brother to prevent him from exposing your crimes." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. "That's insane." Lady Vane's composure cracked. "Lord Marcus died in a riding accident. His horse was drugged. I have testimony from the veterinarian who examined the animal and sworn statements from servants who saw your hired man administer the substance." Theron's voice was relentless. "Marcus wrote everything he discovered in a letter before his death: the fraud, the smuggling, the trafficking of human beings." "Human trafficking?" Lady Pemberton's voice rose in horror. "Surely not." "Ask your Duchess," Lady Vane snapped, pointing at Elowen. "She's behind this. A bitter, discarded woman spreading lies because her own sister was preferred over her." Elowen stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I was engaged to your son for 8 months. I saw the manifests that didn't match cargo. I heard the sounds from locked cellars. I watched visitors arrive without names and servants disappear without explanation." She turned to the crowd. "I didn't understand what I was seeing then. I do now." "The word of a spurned bride," Aldrich sneered. "Worthless." "Then perhaps you'll believe me." A new voice rang out. The crowd parted. A young woman walked forward, pale but determined, supported by one of Theron's men. She'd been recovered from the Vane warehouse just hours ago, shaken but unbroken. "Marjorie!" Elowen rushed toward her cousin. "I'm all right." Marjorie's voice shook but held. "They kept me in a warehouse by the docks. I wasn't alone. There were others. Women and children, locked in cages, waiting to be loaded onto ships." She looked at the Vanes with undisguised hatred. "I saw the manifests. I saw the names of the ships. Vane ships. All of them." The room erupted. "This is absurd!" Lord Vane shouted. "You've coached this girl to lie." "Then explain why your warehouse contains imprisoned people," Theron said coldly. "Explain why Lord Ashford's men are currently securing that location with officers from the magistrate. Explain why your own bookkeeper has agreed to testify in exchange for immunity." Lord Vane's face went gray. "Bookkeeper?" "Mr. Harris. He kept very detailed records. Everything, Lord Vane. Every transaction, every shipment, every bribe." Theron's smile was ice. "Your empire is finished." "This is a conspiracy!" Lady Vane shrieked. "You've manufactured all of this." "No." Lady Grantham stepped forward. "My audit confirmed the financial fraud. I lost £40,000 to your schemes." Other voices joined hers. "Lord Thornton, Lady Pemberton," a chorus of accusations from people who'd finally seen the truth. Lisette grabbed Aldrich's arm. "Do something." But Aldrich was staring at the crowd turning against his family, at the officers appearing at the ballroom doors, at the complete collapse of everything he'd believed untouchable. "It's over," he said numbly. Lord Pemberton raised his hand for silence. Lord Vane, Lady Vane, Lord Aldrich, you will surrender yourselves to the magistrate's officers immediately. If these accusations prove true, you will face the full weight of the law. As the officers moved forward, Lady Vane turned to Elowyn one final time. You've destroyed us. Are you satisfied? Elowyn met her gaze without flinching. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone saw it. The Vanes were led away. Lisette, suddenly alone, looked at Elowyn with something between hatred and despair. Sister, Elowyn said quietly, you chose the wrong side. Lisette had no answer. Hours later, Elowyn stood on Thornhaven's balcony, watching dawn break over the moors. The night had been endless. Statements to magistrates, comforting Marjorie, accepting congratulations from allies who'd witnessed the Vanes' fall. Footsteps approached behind her. You should sleep, Theron said. I can't. My mind won't quiet. He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. It's done. The Vanes will face trial. Their victims will receive justice. Marcus will finally rest. And us? Elowyn turned to face him. What happens to us now? Theron was quiet for a long moment. That depends on what you want. Our arrangement was for mutual benefit, protection for you, and information for me. Both objectives are now complete. If you wish to dissolve the marriage, I can arrange. Is that what you want? Elowyn interrupted. To dissolve it? No. The word came quickly, fiercely. No, that's not what I want. Then what do you want, Theron? Not strategy. Not arrangements. What do you actually want? He turned to face her fully, something vulnerable breaking through his careful control. I want mornings like this, with you beside me. I want dinners where we talk about something other than revenge. I want to build something instead of tearing things down. He took her hands. I want you, Elowyn. Not as an arrangement, as a choice. My choice. Elowyn felt tears prick her eyes. I was supposed to be nothing. A placeholder bride for a man who never wanted me. Background decoration for a family that saw me as a signature on contracts. You were never nothing. I felt like nothing. Until you. She squeezed his hands. You saw me when everyone else looked through me. You gave me purpose when I had none. You made me believe I could be more than what they told me I was. You were always more. I just gave you the opportunity to prove it. Theron. She stepped closer. I love you. I didn't plan to. I didn't expect to. But somewhere between the cathedral and this moment, it became true. His breath caught. Elowyn, you don't have to say it back. I know emotions aren't your strength. I just needed you to know. He kissed her before she could finish, pulling her close with a desperation that betrayed everything his controlled exterior tried to hide. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I love you too, he said roughly. I've loved you since you negotiated conditions in a moving carriage while still wearing your wedding dress. I've loved you since you asked a stranger what happens after revenge. I've loved you so long, I forgot what it felt like not to. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. You're not an arrangement, Elowyn. You're everything. She laughed, tears streaming down her face. For a man who claims emotions aren't his strength, that was rather eloquent. I've been practicing. Have you? Every night lying awake, trying to find words that might be worthy of you. He wiped her tears with gentle thumbs. I never found them. So I'll just keep trying. They stood together as the sun rose. Two people who'd found each other through betrayal and emerged with something neither expected. A love built on truth, tested by fire, and strong enough to face whatever came next. 6 months later, Thornhaven had transformed. The East Wing now housed the Blackwood Foundation, a haven for women and children rescued from trafficking networks. Marjorie, fully recovered, helped manage the charity's correspondence. Survivors arrived weekly, finding safety, education, and new beginnings within walls that had once felt like a fortress of solitude. Elowen stood in the main hall, reviewing plans for expansion, when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. "You have a visitor," Theron said. Lisette stood behind him, dressed simply, her golden beauty dimmed by months of scandal and social exile. Their parents had fled to the continent to escape creditors. The Mercer Shipping Company had collapsed alongside the Vanes. Everything Lisette had schemed to possess had turned to ash. "May I speak with you?" Lisette's voice was small. "Please?" Elowen dismissed the staff and faced her sister alone. "I don't expect forgiveness," Lisette said. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. How wrong it was." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You were always better than me. Kinder, smarter, more principled. I hated you for it. I wanted to take everything you had just to prove I could. And now? Now I have nothing. No husband, no money, no friends. Everyone who flattered me disappeared the moment I became inconvenient." Lisette laughed bitterly. "Exactly like I treated you." Elowen was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the altar, the humiliation, the cold certainty that her life was over. She thought about everything she'd built since then, everything she'd become. "I'm not going to pretend what you did doesn't still hurt," Elowen said finally. "But I'm also not going to let hatred define me." She paused. "The foundation needs volunteers. Administrative work, nothing glamorous. If you want to do something useful with your life instead of wallowing in self-pity, the opportunity exists." Lisette stared at her. "You'd let me work here? After everything?" "I'd let you earn a second chance. Whether you take it is up to you." That evening, Elowen and Theron walked through the gardens as autumn leaves drifted around them. The same gardens where she'd first learned to be a duchess. The same paths where she'd practiced holding her head high. "You didn't have to offer her anything," Theron said. "I know. But someone once showed me that people can become more than their worst moments." She squeezed his arm. "I figured I'd pass on the lesson." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You constantly surprise me." "Good. I'd hate to be predictable." "Never that." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I have something for you." Inside was a ring, delicate gold set with an emerald that caught the fading sunlight. "My mother gave this to my father on their 25th anniversary," Theron said. She told him it represented growth, how their love had grown stronger every year despite every challenge. He slipped it onto her finger beside her wedding band. "We haven't had 25 years yet, but I wanted you to know I'm planning on them." Elowen looked at the ring, then at the man who'd claimed her from the wreckage of her worst day and helped her become someone she never imagined. "Only 25? She asked, smiling. "To start. I'm willing to negotiate for more." She kissed him there in the garden, surrounded by autumn colors and the sounds of hope coming from the windows of the foundation behind them. She'd stood at an altar once, watching her world collapse. Now she stood in a garden, watching a new world begin. Some endings, she'd learned, were really just beginnings in disguise. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story moved you, if Elowen's journey from abandoned bride to powerful duchess touched something real, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me your favorite moment and where you're listening from. And if you're ready for another story where love rises from ashes, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss what's coming next. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures.